Wilderness adventures often promise beauty, freedom, and unforgettable memories. But in an instant, the calm can shatter. Remote forests, icy coasts, and even quiet backyards can become the stage for terrifying confrontations where instinct takes over and survival becomes the only goal. From a hot air balloon crash in Russia's Ussuri that left 6 maimed to a backyard barbecue ambushed in Oregon, these stories reveal how quickly safety can vanish. In this video, we'll explore 6 chilling true tales of bear attacks on humans, ordinary outings that turned into desperate fights for survival. The Ussuri region of Russia, with its dense taiga forests stretching endlessly toward the Chinese border, had long been recognized for its untamed wilderness. In June 2025, the area grew increasingly popular among adventure tourists seeking authentic experiences away from overcrowded destinations. The remote forests, inhabited by Siberian tigers and Asiatic black bears, offered breathtaking aerial views rarely seen by outsiders. Local operators had begun arranging hot air balloon rides over the pristine wilderness, though oversight remained inconsistent and safety procedures varied widely between providers. Among those drawn to this isolated adventure was Olga Petrov, a 42-year-old engineer from Vladivostok. She had meticulously planned the journey as a graduation gift for her daughter, Irina, who had just completed secondary school and was preparing to attend university in Moscow that autumn. Joining them was Sergei Ivanov, a 50-year-old entrepreneur who managed a chain of dining establishments in the region, accompanied by his nephew, Mikhail Voronin, a 28-year-old photographer eager to capture images of the vast wilderness. 2 tourists from Uzbekistan, 33-year-old Rustam Karimov and 31-year-old Amina Sharapova, met the group at their hotel and agreed to share the balloon ride in order to reduce expenses. The morning of June 24th arrived crisp and clear, with calm air and minimal winds, seemingly perfect for flight. The group assembled at a makeshift launch site carved into a forest clearing. Their pilot, an older local man who claimed decades of experience, prepared the balloon while speaking with confident authority. The wicker basket appeared sturdy, though fraying could be seen along several connecting ropes. When concerns were raised, the pilot dismissed them as routine wear, insisting there was no cause for alarm. As the balloon lifted gracefully into the sky, the 6 passengers were immediately captivated by the panoramic view. Below stretched an endless sea of green canopy, broken only by winding rivers that shimmered like silver ribbons under the morning sun. Irina eagerly pointed out animal movement in the treetops, her youthful excitement filling the air. Mikhail busied himself with his camera, capturing the serene wilderness from every angle. Rustam and Amina, meanwhile, compared the Russian taiga to the mountain landscapes of their homeland, reflecting on similarities and contrasts. The ride felt dreamlike, a rare escape from the noise and weight of city life. For nearly an hour, the balloon glided peacefully, shifting between altitudes as the pilot adjusted burners to catch favorable wind currents. He occasionally explained elements of balloon navigation, his tone suggesting a man proud of his skill. Olga felt deep satisfaction in witnessing her daughter's joy, while Sergei's thoughts wandered toward future company outings, imagining similar adventures for his employees. Every sign suggested the day would remain flawless. The first indication of danger came when the balloon's descent began to accelerate, despite repeated burner adjustments. The pilot muttered anxiously as he worked the controls with increasing urgency. The vessel continued to sink, the forest canopy rushing closer at an alarming rate. Towering fir trees, some stretching nearly 40 meters high, loomed suddenly near the basket's edge. Confusion rippled among the passengers. They braced themselves as the pilot issued urgent instructions, though his hurried words were not understood by all. Mikhail quickly conveyed the message to Rustam and Amina, urging them to secure themselves against the basket wall. Tension mounted as the trees drew closer. Disaster struck when the balloon snagged against a particularly tall fir. Fabric tore with a harsh ripping sound, releasing hot air in a violent rush. The envelope shredded along its seam, sending the basket tilting precariously. Passengers collided as the vessel lurched violently downward. Loose equipment clattered across the floor. Within moments, the balloon plummeted the final stretch and crashed into a forest clearing with brutal force. The impact was devastating. The basket overturned, pinning Olga and Irina beneath one of its heavy panels. The pilot was thrown clear and landed unconscious near the deflated balloon envelope. Sergei and Mikhail, though badly shaken and bleeding from cuts, remained mobile. Rustam suffered a head injury that left him disoriented and bleeding, while Amina clutched her twisted ankle, grimacing in pain. The clearing fell into an eerie stillness. From beneath the overturned basket, faint cries of distress revealed that Olga and her daughter were alive but trapped, their voices edged with pain. Sergei and Mikhail, despite their injuries, struggled to lift the heavy panel but could barely shift it. Around them, remnants of their lunch, sandwiches and fruit, were scattered across the ground. It was then that the wilderness revealed its most terrifying presence. From the tree line, a massive bear emerged, drawn by noise and the scent of food. Standing upright, the animal towered nearly 3 meters tall, embodying the raw, unyielding force of the wild. The bear advanced without hesitation, reacting either from territorial instinct or confusion at the chaotic scene. It moved directly toward the overturned basket where Olga and Irina lay trapped. The wicker structure rattled under its claws as the animal pressed its weight upon them, shredding through with alarming power. Desperate to intervene, Sergei and Mikhail attempted to draw the predator's focus. Their shouts and frantic movements managed to gain its attention briefly. The bear swiped Sergei aside with terrifying strength, hurling him into the undergrowth where he lay motionless. Mikhail seized a broken section of basket pole and struck at the animal, but its sheer mass overwhelmed him, knocking him down with crushing force. Rustam, staggering from his head wound, grabbed a heavy branch in defiance. He swung wildly, landing a strike that barely deterred the bear before claws raked across his chest, leaving deep, bleeding wounds. Amina, unable to flee on her injured ankle, tried to shield herself behind debris, but the animal struck her arm, leaving painful lacerations. The assault lasted mere minutes, though to the survivors it felt endless. Confusion, blood, and terror filled the clearing until, abruptly, the bear retreated. Perhaps the noise, resistance, and strange wreckage convinced it to withdraw deeper into the forest. Silence descended again, broken only by the pained groans of the injured. Time dragged on as the survivors endured shock and agony. Hours later, rescue helicopters finally homed in on the crash site, guided by emergency beacon signals. Paramedics rushed in to find all 6 survivors in various states of critical condition, 4 hovering on the edge of collapse. Huddled together among torn fabric and shattered wicker, they clung to one another in disbelief. What had begun as a joyous morning flight had ended in a struggle for survival, etched into memory as a stark reminder of the unpredictable dangers lurking within the wild. The tragedy soon circulated widely as a cautionary tale, highlighting both the allure and the perils of adventure, tourism in remote places where rescue resources remain limited and where nature's power cannot be underestimated. Kodiak Island, situated in the Gulf of Alaska, had earned recognition as one of the most pristine fishing destinations in North America by 2019. The island's remote streams, fed by glacial runoff and seasonal salmon runs, drew anglers from across the continent who sought both challenge and solitude. Thick alder thickets and towering Sitka spruces defined a wilderness that remained largely unchanged for centuries. Yet the island was also known as the home of the largest subspecies of brown bear in the world, with adult males sometimes weighing more than 680 kilograms during peak salmon season. Mark Dawson, a 36-year-old contractor from Seattle, had spent nearly 2 years planning a fishing trip with his younger brother Aaron, aged 32. Both were experienced fly fishermen, accustomed to navigating rugged waters throughout the Pacific Northwest. but this destination represented the ultimate test of their skills. Aaron, a software engineer by profession, had specifically arranged time off during the height of the salmon run to maximize their chances of landing truly remarkable fish. 3 days prior, the brothers had flown into the island's main settlement and arranged transport via bush pilot to a remote stream system some 40 kilometers from the nearest habitation. Their plan was simple yet demanding. Spend an entire week camping beside the water, documenting their catches, and immersing themselves in a wilderness few people ever encountered. Local guides had provided detailed instructions on safety protocols, stressing the necessity of storing food securely and making noise when moving through bear country. By their 4th morning, conditions seemed ideal. Recent rainfall had elevated water levels slightly, encouraging more fish to push upstream, and the sound of rushing water carried the crisp scent of pine that every serious angler found invigorating. Mark and Aaron selected a promising bend where the current formed natural holding pockets for large salmon. For nearly an hour, Mark worked a promising pool before feeling the powerful strike of a fish on his line. The battle that followed demonstrated the sheer strength of a Chinook salmon in full run, as the fish stripped line from his reel in forceful surges. Aaron stood downstream, capturing the event with his waterproof camera. After minutes of steady pressure, Mark finally guided the massive fish into shallow water, triumphant and exhausted. The salmon weighed close to 15 kilograms, exactly the kind of catch that had inspired the brothers to travel so far. Mark waited to secure it, while Aaron moved closer to photograph the moment. Their attention focused entirely on the prize they had worked so hard to achieve. Neither man noticed the silent arrival of a predator until it was too late. From the cover of dense brush emerged a Kodiak bear, massive in both stature and presence. Standing nearly 4 meters tall on its hind legs, the animal represented the peak of predatory strength within this ecosystem. Its heavy chocolate-brown fur and muscular shoulders marked it as a mature male, likely surpassing half a metric ton in weight. Drawn by the scent of salmon and the activity along the stream, it closed the distance with startling speed. Mark, still kneeling with the salmon, looked up only as the bear charged across the rocky bank. The animal's bulk seemed impossible for its agility, yet in seconds it was upon him. With no path of escape, Mark was forced against a boulder as the bear's massive paws pinned his chest and shoulders. Sharp claws tore across his fishing vest, shredding fabric and opening deep gashes along his arms and torso. Blood began flowing freely as he struggled helplessly beneath the crushing weight. His cries of distress carried across the stream, urging Aaron into action. Aaron abandoned his equipment and rushed forward. Armed only with his fishing rod, he struck at the bear's hindquarters, raising his voice in desperation. The animal turned suddenly, delivering a swipe that struck Aaron across the torso with terrifying force. The impact hurled him into the water, where he struck rocks and came to rest several meters downstream. Gashes along his torso and legs began bleeding heavily, staining the current with crimson. Both brothers now lay gravely injured while the bear returned its focus to the salmon lying near Mark's original position. Despite their condition, neither man surrendered. Mark, gasping from chest wounds, seized an aluminum landing net and swung with all remaining strength. Aaron, battered yet conscious, clawed his way back onto the bank and hurled stones at the predator. Their resistance seemed futile against such power, but desperation fueled them. The bear hesitated, seemingly torn between claiming the salmon and responding to the persistent human interference. It made several mock charges at Aaron, who stumbled backward with each advance, before finally returning to the fish. After several tense minutes, the enormous animal dragged the salmon into the forest, leaving the brothers battered but alive. Hours passed before emergency crews arrived, guided by GPS coordinates transmitted from the brothers' beacon. Paramedics found Mark suffering from life-threatening lacerations across his chest and arms, while Aaron's torso and legs bore deep trauma from the attack. Both men required immediate evacuation and extensive medical intervention. The stream that had once promised a perfect fishing experience had instead become the site of a violent struggle for survival. What began as a long-awaited expedition between brothers was transformed in seconds into a reminder of the raw and unpredictable force of nature. The incident soon spread as a cautionary tale of the risks inherent in remote wilderness adventures, where the boundary between human endeavor and natural dominance is always fragile. The remote wilderness of northwestern Montana had drawn families in search of authentic outdoor experiences since the early 2000s. During that period, cabin rentals in isolated landscapes became increasingly popular among urban residents eager to escape the relentless pace of modern life. By 2017, dozens of rustic private cabins were scattered across the region's vast forests, each one offering visitors a temporary retreat into a quieter, more elemental existence. These small wooden structures provided the opportunity to disconnect from the digital world while still remaining within a reasonable distance of basic emergency services. The forests themselves were both beautiful and formidable. Towering pines stretched toward the sky, their trunks thick with age, while undergrowth formed a dense tangle that made travel off the trails nearly impossible. Wildlife thrived in these untouched ecosystems, ranging from small foraging animals to predators that commanded respect. Encounters with deer, elk, and smaller mammals were common and usually harmless, but the looming presence of bears, cougars, and wolves was an ever-present reality. Most visitors never experienced anything more alarming than a startled deer bolting across a trail, yet the possibility of something more dangerous remained a constant reminder of the wilderness's raw power. Thomas Jensen, a 42-year-old accountant from Minneapolis, was among those who had succumbed to the lure of these wild spaces. 3 years earlier, he had purchased a secluded property with a rustic cabin, envisioning it as a weekend retreat where his family could reconnect with one another away from the demands of suburban life. His wife, Patricia, 38, worked as a school administrator and immediately appreciated the property's complete lack of internet connectivity, something she saw as essential for encouraging meaningful time together. Their children, Emma, age 14, and Lucas, age 11, had initially grumbled about the absence of electronic entertainment, but over time they grew to value the experience. Hiking, fishing, and discovering small wonders of the forest became activities they associated with family bonding rather than inconvenience. The cabin sat on 20 acres of heavily forested terrain, positioned roughly 15 kilometers from the nearest paved road. Access required navigating a winding gravel track that became treacherous in rain or snow. Thomas had invested in modest infrastructure improvements. Solar panels provided limited electricity, supplemented by a propane generator when demand rose. A hand-pumped well offered fresh water, while a wood-burning stove heated the cabin during the colder months. Despite its remoteness, the property represented a balance between primitive living and essential comfort. It gave the family the sense of genuine wilderness immersion without the discomfort and complications of tent camping. Their July weekend visit followed the predictable rhythm of past trips. On Saturday, they spent the day hiking familiar trails, stopping often to examine wildflowers or gather rocks of unusual shapes. The children displayed their unique personalities in these pursuits. Emma, thoughtful and artistic, experimented with photography by framing forest details in her camera lens, while Lucas, restless and curious, scoured the underbrush in search of insects to capture temporarily in jars. Patricia managed the evening meal at the outdoor fire pit, grilling steaks while Thomas assisted the children in roasting marshmallows. The smoky aroma mingled with fresh mountain air, creating an atmosphere both comforting and primal. After the meal, the family retreated indoors as the weather shifted. A soft rain began to patter on the cabin's metal roof, filling the air with the earthy scent of wet pine needles. They gathered around Thomas's laptop, one of the few concessions to modern conveniences during these trips, and watched a lighthearted adventure film. The steady rhythm of rain on steel, coupled with the flickering glow of the screen, made the cabin feel secure and insulated, as though the outside world had faded into irrelevance. Near midnight, Thomas stepped outside. Rather than using the cabin's primitive indoor facilities, he preferred to relieve himself outdoors, as he often did during these weekends. The rain had ceased, leaving the night air sharp and clean. Clouds shifted across the sky, revealing fragments of moonlight that illuminated the clearing. For a moment he stood still, inhaling the silence, recognizing it as something rare and precious compared to the ceaseless hum of the city. It was then that movement caught his attention. At first, he assumed the large shadow near the outdoor dining area was merely a trick of dim light, or perhaps a deer nosing through leftovers. But as his eyes adjusted, the form revealed itself as something far larger, more deliberate, and more dangerous. Drawn by the lingering scent of grilled meat and the unsecured trash container Thomas had left on the porch, a grizzly bear had wandered into the clearing. Towering over 2.5 meters when standing fully upright, the bear embodied the wilderness at its most formidable. Its thick coat rippled with power, and its presence radiated raw dominance. This was not a distant, theoretical danger from a pamphlet about wilderness safety. It was reality, immediate and undeniable. As Thomas shifted his weight, his foot snapped a branch underfoot. The sharp crack echoed unnaturally loud in the night. The bear turned at once, dark eyes locking onto him. Then, with terrifying speed, it charged. Thomas barely had time to react. The massive body closed the distance in seconds, and before he could retreat inside, the bear's momentum slammed him against the cabin's log wall. The impact rattled the structure, shattering porch furniture and clawing deep gouges into the wooden frame. Thomas rolled sideways, narrowly avoiding a direct strike, but he found himself trapped in the open with no clear escape. Inside, Patricia and the children heard the violence erupt. The sudden crashing and deep guttural sounds left no doubt that something catastrophic was occurring just beyond the walls. Emma and Lucas instinctively took shelter under the dining table, while Patricia pressed herself to a window, her mind torn between the terror of what she witnessed and the instinct to protect her children. Outside, her husband fought for survival against a predator that seemed unstoppable. Desperation took over Thomas's actions. He seized a heavy wooden chair from the porch and began swinging it wildly, smashing it against the wall and shouting with all the force his lungs could muster. The noise echoed through the clearing, startling birds from nearby trees. His only hope was that the sheer chaos would make the bear reconsider. Each blow splintered the chair further, but the racket seemed to rattle the predator's confidence. Minutes dragged like hours. Finally, the grizzly backed away, pacing at the edge of the clearing before melting into the forest shadows. Thomas froze against the cabin wall, muscles locked, ears straining for any sign of its return. His chest heaved with exhaustion and adrenaline. He realized with stark clarity how close death had come to his family. When he eventually re-entered the cabin, his family's fear was palpable. Patricia clutched the children tightly, Emma's tears soaking into her mother's shoulder, while Lucas's repeated questions, pleading to know whether the danger was truly gone, filled the small space. The immediate threat had passed, but its imprint lingered. Thomas's injuries were superficial, scratches along his arms and deep bruises across his ribs. Yet the psychological scar was profound. The family's retreat, once a sanctuary of peace, had revealed the full truth of wilderness living, beauty inseparably intertwined with danger. For months afterward, the memory of that night haunted them, a constant reminder that nature's grandeur came hand in hand with risks that suburban life rarely prepared anyone to face. The remote Arctic research settlement situated on the Svalbard archipelago stood among the northernmost permanent scientific communities on Earth by 2014. Located at nearly 79 degrees north latitude, the settlement supported roughly 30 year-round residents who maintained research stations focused on climate, biology, and environmental monitoring. Life in this community was shaped by extreme isolation, unrelenting cold, and the constant awareness that polar bears could appear at any time. Safety protocols required residents to remain vigilant, and armed guards were mandatory whenever anyone stepped beyond designated safe zones. In such a harsh environment, moments of joy were treasured. The settlement's annual winter festival had become a vital tradition, giving residents something to anticipate during the oppressive months of polar night. Preparations began weeks in advance, with neighbors planning displays of lights, traditional foods, and cultural performances. These events lifted morale, helping people endure the endless darkness and psychological strain of Arctic living. For a brief time each winter, survival gave way to celebration. Among those preparing for the 2014 festival were Lars Nielsen, a 42-year-old meteorologist from southern Norway, and Erik Johansson, a 37-year-old logistics coordinator. Lars had lived in the settlement nearly 5 years, maintaining weather stations and collecting atmospheric data essential to global climate studies. His work demanded precision, patience, and resilience in the face of conditions that would send most people fleeing for warmer latitudes. Erik, on the other hand, had arrived 3 years earlier. His role was indispensable, managing deliveries, overseeing equipment, and ensuring that vital supplies reached the community despite the treacherous Arctic shipping routes. Both men had earned reputations for reliability and became anchors in the small settlement's social fabric. On January 15th, the two men worked late into the night as final preparations continued. Outside, the weather turned volatile. Arctic storms were infamous for developing suddenly, and what began as light snowfall soon intensified. Forecasts had predicted only moderate accumulation, but by evening the wind howled at speeds far greater than anticipated. Snow slashed through the air in blinding sheets, and visibility began collapsing by the hour. Lars braved the storm to secure decorative lanterns along the main walkway. Each lantern was designed to endure gusting winds without becoming a fire hazard. These lights symbolized months of planning, their colors intended to break the oppressive darkness that consumed the settlement during the long winter. Every placement required careful work, and each trip outside was timed to avoid frostbite. He would dash into the cold, adjust the lanterns, and return to warmth before venturing out again. Meanwhile, Erik concentrated on the food supplies. He stacked crates of preserved fish beside the communal smokehouse, where traditional preparation methods would transform them into celebratory dishes. The salted cod had been imported from the mainland at considerable expense and represented one of the festival's most anticipated delicacies. Handling the cargo in sub-zero temperatures demanded strength, focus, and endurance. Yet Erik worked methodically, knowing how important these supplies were to morale. As midnight approached, the storm reached full strength. Winds roared at near hurricane force, driving snow horizontally until the settlement seemed swallowed in a blinding white void. Both men knew they should retreat indoors immediately, but the storm had trapped them in an exposed position. Arctic training emphasized the mortal risk of disorientation. Even short distances between buildings could prove fatal in whiteout conditions. It was within this chaos that the danger appeared. Out of the swirling snow came a massive polar bear, its thick white fur making it nearly invisible until it was frighteningly close. Adult males could weigh more than 450 kilograms, and this one embodied the species' terrifying presence. The great predator's size, power, and hunger left no question of the threat it posed. Shifting ice conditions had driven polar bears inland with increasing frequency. Climate change was eroding the sea ice they relied upon to hunt seals, forcing them closer to human settlements in search of food. The scent of preserved fish and the activity surrounding the festival had likely lured the animal toward the heart of the community. To encounter such a predator in the middle of a violent storm was a nightmare scenario. The bear lumbered into the preparation area, paws crushing deep tracks in the snow. Its attention fixed immediately on the stacked crates. Driven by hunger, it advanced with single-minded determination. Erik's hard work was undone in moments as the bear tore through wooden containers, scattering frozen fish across the ground with terrifying ease. Splinters flew in the storm wind as the predator swiped and clawed, its strength obliterating everything in its path. Lars reacted first. From an emergency kit, he pulled a flare gun, hoping the combination of noise and light would frighten the intruder. The red flare streaked into the darkness, casting eerie shadows across the snow-laden ground. For an instant, the predator was illuminated in full, an enormous figure dwarfed by nothing. Yet the bear pressed forward, unfazed by the display. Eric, armed with only a metal pole from the smokehouse equipment, attempted to stand his ground. He swung desperately, striking at the animal's massive head and shoulders. But the polar bear's strength and reach rendered his defense useless. With one swipe, its claws ripped through the pole and sent Eric staggering backward. Blood quickly soaked the snow as deep gashes opened across his legs. Lars's attempt at intervention ended no better. The bear struck him with a single devastating blow, hurling his body into a snowdrift. Pain exploded through his ribs and chest, while the freezing cold immediately compounded his injuries. His heavy protective clothing was shredded, and blood began seeping through layers of fabric. He fought to remain conscious as the blizzard raged around him. Eric continued to struggle, but another violent strike knocked him flat against the ice. He slid across the ground, leaving a streak that the storm winds soon concealed. The predator, relentless and hungry, continued to paw through the scattered fish, but its aggression toward the men had already inflicted devastating consequences. By the time emergency responders reached the site, summoned by perimeter alarms that activated automatically when the bear breached restricted zones, the scene was catastrophic. Lars had succumbed to a combination of massive trauma and rapid hypothermia before aid could arrive. Eric, though critically injured, was still alive. He was rushed to medical evacuation, enduring a perilous journey to a mainland hospital where his survival would depend on immediate intervention. The aftermath was haunting. What had been a place of joyful preparation was left in ruins, shattered crates and lanterns scattered across snowdrifts, all against the backdrop of a howling storm. The loss of one life and the near loss of another underscored the grim reality of life in polar bear territory. Even in a close-knit settlement bound by tradition and resilience, the Arctic could turn hostile in an instant. The tragedy forced immediate changes. Safety procedures were revised, requiring stricter monitoring of food storage and greater caution during storms. Guards were ordered to remain on constant watch, even during festival preparations. For the community, the incident served as a stark reminder. The beauty of the Arctic was matched only by its peril, and survival demanded constant respect for the predators that shared the land. The rolling hills of northern Italy's Trentino region had supported viticulture for more than 2 millennia, with Roman settlers among the first to recognize the land's remarkable potential for wine production. By 2021, the region had balanced traditional methods with modern agricultural technology, producing internationally acclaimed wines from indigenous grape varieties. Despite this success, the area's proximity to the Alps meant that wildlife encounters, though rare, remained possible as brown bears occasionally descended from mountain forests in search of food. Luca Romano, a third-generation winemaker aged 38, had inherited his family's vineyard from his grandfather 5 years earlier. The 12-hectare property specialized in Marzemino, a distinctive red grape that thrived in the region's unique microclimate. His commitment to sustainable farming and minimal intervention winemaking had earned recognition across Europe, though the demands of harvest season required constant vigilance. Working with him was Sofia Benedetti, a 31-year-old agricultural engineer from Bologna. She joined the vineyard 2 seasons earlier and brought expertise in irrigation systems and soil management that complemented Luca's traditional knowledge. Together, they implemented precision farming practices that improved grape quality while reducing water consumption, an increasingly critical concern during dry summers attributed to climate change. On August 23rd, the day had reached nearly 35 degrees Celsius before cooling into a pleasant evening. Inspections at dusk were vital for determining harvest readiness. The Marzamino grapes had nearly reached peak maturity, meaning every hour of monitoring carried weight. Luca moved row by row, sampling grapes to judge sugar levels and flavor development. His trained palate could detect subtle signs of readiness, information essential for timing the harvest. Sophia, about 50 meters away, checked the drip irrigation lines. Sensors reported soil conditions that guided water distribution during these final weeks before harvest. Both were deeply focused on their tasks when the unexpected occurred. From the oak forest on the vineyard's edge, a massive brown bear emerged. Adult bears were rarely seen in the region, making the sight shocking. This animal appeared to be a large male, weighing close to 200 kilograms and standing nearly 2 meters tall. Drawn by the aroma of ripening grapes, it entered the vineyard in search of food. The bear advanced quickly, crashing through rows of vines. Wooden trellises splintered beneath its weight, and clusters of fruit were crushed underfoot. The destruction unfolded in seconds, shattering the quiet evening with the sounds of breaking wood and bursting grapes. Luca tried to drive the bear away by flashing his light and shouting, but the animal pressed forward undeterred. When he moved closer in desperation, the bear lashed out with its paw, hurling him backward into a support post and tearing his jacket. The blow left deep scratches across his chest and shoulder. Dazed and bleeding, Luca struggled to rise. The bear continued tearing through the vines, but its closeness made any movement perilous. Seeing him injured, Sophia seized a metal irrigation pipe and charged forward, striking in an attempt to distract the animal. Though her background offered no training for such encounters, she acted instinctively. The bear swung at her, knocking her down and slashing her legs with its claws. For several harrowing minutes, both tried to avoid further injury while resisting the rampaging animal. Luca, fighting through pain and dizziness, managed to activate an emergency alert on his phone, though he knew help would take time to arrive. Sophia continued brandishing tools to hold the bear's attention, determined to protect them both despite her wounds. Eventually, the bear appeared to lose interest. Having eaten enough grapes and trampled its fill, it retreated toward the forest. The sudden silence left behind a scene of devastation. Broken trellises, crushed vines, and ruined fruit scattered across the ground. Years of cultivation had been destroyed in moments. Emergency responders reached the site about 45 minutes later. Luca was treated for deep lacerations and possible internal injuries from his collision with the post. Sophia's leg wounds required cleaning and suturing, but no major arteries had been damaged. Both survived, though shaken. Physical recovery came with time, but the psychological impact lingered. The section of vineyard devastated by the bear required full replanting, a costly setback that insurance only partly covered. For months afterward, Luca and Sophia adjusted their routines, approaching evening work with greater caution. The incident spread quickly among neighboring growers. Many viewed it as a warning about the unpredictable intersection of agriculture and wildlife, particularly as climate change altered traditional animal behaviors. The Trentino encounter, though isolated, underscored the vulnerability of even the most carefully maintained vineyards to forces beyond human control. Ashland, Oregon, situated in the foothills of the Siskiyou Mountains, experienced rapid suburban growth throughout the 2000s as professionals sought small-town living within commuting distance of larger cities. By 2022, residential developments extended into once untouched forest edges where manicured lawns met dense woodland. This expansion into traditional wildlife corridors created conditions where encounters between suburban families and large predators became increasingly common. The Johnson family had purchased their 4-bedroom home 3 years earlier, deliberately choosing a property that bordered preserved forest. Sarah Johnson, a 34-year-old marketing manager, appreciated the privacy and natural beauty that the wooded setting offered. Her husband, Mark, a 36-year-old civil engineer, had added outdoor lighting and a spacious deck designed for entertaining, with views stretching toward the mountains. Their annual summer barbecue soon became a neighborhood tradition, drawing friends and colleagues for food, drinks, and conversation. This year's event brought together nearly 20 adults and a dozen children, filling the yard with a festive atmosphere that lasted well into the evening. For the Johnsons, the gathering represented both a welcome break from daily pressures and a chance to deepen bonds within their community. On July 14th, guests began arriving around 6 o'clock as temperatures dropped from the day's summer heat. Mark spent the afternoon preparing his signature barbecue sauce and marinating meats, while Sarah coordinated side dishes and beverages. Children from several families turned the adjacent woods into their playground, organizing elaborate games of tag and hide-and-seek. As twilight fell, sparklers were handed out, and the children dashed across the yard, leaving trails of light against the backdrop of the darkening forest. Adults gathered near the deck's outdoor speakers, laughing and trading stories while savoring grilled food and cold drinks. The evening seemed to embody everything that had made the family's move from the city worthwhile. The peace broke suddenly when a massive black bear emerged from the trees behind the Johnsons' home. Adult males could weigh over 140 kilograms, and despite their name, their coats often ranged from deep brown to cinnamon shades. This animal appeared healthy and well-fed, evidence of a successful summer of foraging. Wildlife officials later concluded it had likely been passing through the neighborhood for weeks, encouraged by unsecured trash containers and pet food left outdoors. The concentrated aroma of grilled meat and abundant leftovers had proven irresistible, drawing the animal closer to people than usual. The bear crashed into the backyard, trampling decorative landscaping and scattering lawn furniture. Guests reacted in panic, racing toward the house in a rush of confusion. Children dropped sparklers, their light trails disappearing into the grass, while adults tried to shepherd everyone inside. The transformation from celebration to chaos happened in seconds. Sarah directed the younger children toward the sliding doors, urging them to move quickly while trying to remain calm. Several children became separated from their parents in the confusion, heightening the urgency. Her voice carried determination, even as fear pressed against her composure. Meanwhile, the bear reached the picnic table, where burgers, hot dogs, and side dishes still sat in serving bowls. With powerful swipes of its claws, it sent plates clattering and food scattering across the deck. Though the animal focused primarily on the meal, its sheer size and unpredictable movements made its presence terrifying for those nearby. Mark grabbed a push broom from outdoor storage and stepped forward, attempting to drive the animal back. He made loud noises and tried to appear larger, methods often recommended during black bear encounters. Yet his efforts were weighed down by fear for his guests' safety and uncertainty about the bear's reactions. The animal responded with a quick strike of its paw, knocking Mark against the deck railing. Pain shot through his ribs as claw marks tore into his forearm. Blood spread through his sleeve, but adrenaline pushed him to keep moving, determined to distract the bear long enough for others to reach safety. Across the fence line, a neighbor's German shepherd erupted into furious barking. The sound drew the bear's attention away from the food, momentarily confusing it. This distraction provided precious seconds for the last of the guests to get inside. After several tense minutes, the bear withdrew, retreating into the dark cover of the forest. Mark remained on the deck, scanning the tree line for signs of a return. His arm throbbed, but he focused on ensuring the danger had truly passed before stepping inside. Within the house, shaken guests gradually calmed as Sarah tended to her husband's injuries. Emergency services were called, and medical personnel later treated Mark's claw wounds, cleaning and bandaging them. His injuries, though painful, proved less severe than feared. Sarah, who had been scratched during the rush indoors, required no treatment beyond basic first aid. What began as a joyful neighborhood gathering ended as a terrifying confrontation with wildlife. The event became a frequent subject of discussion in the community, serving as both a warning and a lesson. Residents took greater care with garbage storage and outdoor food, recognizing the role human behavior played in drawing predators closer. For the Johnson family, the night left behind more than memories of fear. It underscored the delicate boundary between suburban expansion and the natural world that had long existed beyond the forest edge.